The morning sun barely touched the horizon when an earth-shaking sound ripped through the quiet of my ranch, the splintering of my heavy cedar gate under the force of a speeding SUV. I dropped the coffee mug in shock, my heart slamming against my ribs as I sprinted toward the sound. Dust and gravel sprayed into the crisp morning air as Karen's gleaming white SUV barreled through my property like it belonged to her. The oversized HOA bumper sticker almost mocking me. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but the smug, entitled smirk told the entire story. This wasn't a mistake. My blood boiled as I realized this was a deliberate act, a challenge. I shouted at her, voice cracking with fury, but she didn't slow down, didn't even glance at me, kicking up a storm of dirt across my freshly raked pasture. For the first time, the reality hit me. Karen wasn't just reckless. She thought she was untouchable, and my property, my life's work, meant nothing to her. I spent hours repairing the damage, reinforcing the hinges, sinking the posts deeper, muttering under my breath about entitlement and lawlessness. But each splinter felt like an insult to my pride, a warning that the battle for respect and for my land had just begun. The scent of crushed cedar lingered in the air, a bitter reminder that this was more than a gate. It was a line Karen had crossed, and one I wasn't about to let her ignore. Every instinct from my years as a lawman screamed at me. This was the first warning, and the next time I wouldn't be repairing anything. I would be ready. Just a week after the first incident, the early morning calm of my ranch was shattered once again by the unmistakable rumble of Karen's SUV approaching at full speed. My pulse spiked as I dropped the tools I was using near the barn, instinctively knowing exactly what was coming. Dust clouds rolled across the gravel driveway as her tires slammed over my carefully repaired gate, sending splinters flying like shrapnel into the air. I ran toward the commotion, shouting at her to stop, but she only laughed, leaning halfway out of the window with that same smug expression, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. Community easement. Don't be selfish. Community easement? I knew my property rights better than anyone. Yet her words were delivered with such arrogance that it felt like a challenge to everything I stood for. Every nerve in my body went rigid. Years as a lawman had taught me to recognize this kind of deliberate defiance. She thought she could intimidate me with speed, rules, and entitlement. But she didn't understand one thing. Trespass wasn't a joke on my land. By the time she disappeared over the hill, I stood there, heart racing, fists clenched, staring at the damaged gate and the tracks in the gravel. This wasn't just about wood and hinges anymore. It was a test of wills, and I knew I had to be ready. I made mental notes, went back to reinforce the gate even more, and began planning a way to teach her that my property was my line in the sand, and crossing it would have consequences she could never anticipate. The anger simmered in me like fire beneath ice, and one thing was clear. The next time she came through, it wouldn't just be a repair job. It would be a reckoning. The third time it happened, everything inside me snapped. Not violently, but with the cold, quiet clarity a man gets right before he decides he's done being pushed. I was stacking firewood behind the barn when the familiar grinding roar of Karen's SUV echoed across my land like a threat cutting through the calm morning air. The logs fell from my hands, forgotten, as instinct pulled me forward. I walked toward the gate just in time to see her cresting the rise, her headlights slicing through the dust she kicked up, that ridiculous HOA bumper sticker glinting in the sun like a badge of imagined authority. She slowed, not to stop, but to make eye contact with me. That smirk, that entitlement. She rolled down her window and spoke like I was some hired help standing in her way. You really ought to keep this open. It's community courtesy. My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. This is my road, my gate, my ranch. You are trespassing. She lifted her chin with the arrogance of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. You're new here. You don't understand. The HOA sets the rules around this neighborhood. You're not above them. Her voice had that tone, thin, sharp, dripping with superiority. The tone of someone who thought a title gave her dominion over everything she saw. I stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel, heart pounding with a calm anger I hadn't felt in years. I told her plainly, "Turn around." Her expression hardened into pure defiance, and instead of reversing, she pressed the gas. Hard. The engine snarled as her SUV rammed through my gate again, ripping fresh hinges out of the posts with a metallic scream that vibrated through my bones. Dust blasted across my clothes like an insult. Splinters flew past my boots. And her laughter, God, her laughter, echoed behind her as she disappeared down the road. I stood still for a long moment, breathing slow, watching the dust settle in the air like debris after a battle. 30 years in construction, a lifetime on rural land. And before that, years as a county sheriff. I dealt with thieves, drunks, trespassers, and every type of fool you can imagine. But nobody had ever repeatedly disrespected my home like this. By the time I walked toward the ruined gate, something inside me had shifted. I got on my knees beside the splintered wood, not to repair it, no, not this time, but to study it, to measure impact, to understand timing, to mentally mark where her tires hit, where she sped up, where she assumed I'd stand helpless while she treated my land like a shortcut. The anger no longer felt hot. It felt precise, organized, focused. This wasn't going to be another repair job. This was strategy now. She wanted to play queen of the HOA? Fine, but I wasn't her subject. And if she wanted to turn my ranch into her personal highway, then the next time she barreled down this road, she would find something waiting for her. Something she wouldn't expect. Something she wouldn't laugh at. Something that would end this trespassing once and for all. I rose slowly, brushed dust off my jeans, and walked back toward the barn. The decision was already made. It was time to build the trap. I started working on the trap the very next morning, long before the sun burned through the fog that clung to the pastures. The air was cold, quiet and still. The kind of quiet that helps a man think with sharp clarity. I laid my tools out one by one on the tailgate. Steel posts, heavy-duty chains, a concealed drop bar, reflective shatterproof spikes, and a reinforced barrier I'd welded together the night before. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. It was meant to stop someone who refused to listen. Years of construction meant my hands knew exactly what they were doing. Years as a sheriff meant I understood how to design something legal, safe, and undeniable. I measured distances, tracked tire marks, and mapped the exact angle where Karen's SUV always approached. Same speed, same line, same blind confidence every time. The gate she kept destroying was only the outer layer. The real trap would sit just behind it, hidden from view, set to drop into place with a single pull of a switch inside the barn. As I worked, sweat soaking through my shirt, I felt something I hadn't felt since my days on the force. Purpose. Not anger, not revenge. Just a single, razor-focused mission. The new structure looked like a normal repaired gate from the front. But behind it, I built 2 reinforced vertical posts sunk so deep into concrete that a tank would have trouble budging them. Between them, I installed a steel crossbeam disguised as part of the cedar frame. Once locked in place, that beam could stop a full-speed truck without moving an inch. I ran the mechanism 3 times, listening to the heavy clunk echo across the ranch, making sure nothing jammed. Ranger, my old cattle dog, sat by my feet, ears perked, watching me with a calm steadiness. Like he knew something big was coming. By noon, the trap was complete. By sunset, I had tested it in every way possible. And by the time night wrapped itself around the ranch, I found myself standing in front of the gate, hands on my hips, staring at the silent road Karen always used without permission. The gravel shimmered in the moonlight. The wind rustled through the pines. And I realized that the next time she came charging down that hill thinking she owned my land, she would hit a wall she couldn't bully through, argue around, or HOA speech her way out of. This time, she wouldn't destroy my gate. She would finally meet resistance. And the ranch, my ranch, would stand its ground. Karen returned on a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning that starts quiet, but feels wrong in the bones. Like the air itself knows trouble is coming. I was in the barn oiling the hinges on my tractor when I heard it. The distant hum of an engine climbing the hill at a speed no one with respect for private property would ever use. Ranger's ears shot up. My pulse slowed, deep and steady. I walked to the switch mounted beside the barn door, the same switch wired to drop the steel locking beam into place behind the cedar gate. The sound of her SUV grew louder, angrier, like she was trying to make a point with her accelerator. I flicked the switch. A heavy clang rolled across the ranch like thunder, the steel bar locking itself solidly into position. Not 2 seconds later, her white SUV came ripping over the rise, sunlight flashing off its hood like a blade. She didn't brake. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look. She was on her phone, one hand in the air as if lecturing someone invisible, her arrogance burning bright enough to blind her from reality. And then it happened. Her bumper slammed into the reinforced cedar gate with a metallic scream that cut through the morning like a gunshot. The wooden frame didn't shatter this time. Instead, her SUV crumpled like a soda can thrown against a brick wall. The tires skidded, smoke curled up, and the entire vehicle jolted backward as the airbags detonated with a muffled explosion. The impact echoed off the hills, and birds erupted from the tree line in a frantic dark cloud. I stood there as she stumbled out, hair wild, sunglasses cracked, one hand on her forehead as she stared at the unbroken gate like it had betrayed her. What is this?" she gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. I walked toward her, calm as a man who'd been waiting for this moment. "That," I said, pointing at the gate she'd treated like a doormat for weeks, "is private property finally standing up to you." She sputtered, pointing at her broken SUV. You can't do this. I'm reporting you to the HOA. This is illegal." I stepped closer, stopping just short of her, lowering my voice enough that she had to meet my eyes. "You don't have authority here. You don't have jurisdiction. What you do have is a long list of recorded trespasses and property damage. And now," I said, nodding toward her mangled bumper, "a felony-level incident caught on 4 cameras from 3 angles." Her jaw trembled. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen didn't have a comeback. She didn't have a rule book. She didn't have power. She had consequences. And as she stood there, shaken, staring at the trap she never saw coming, I knew the tide had finally turned, not because I'd stopped her SUV, but because I'd stopped the part of her that thought she owned the world. The aftermath of Karen's crash was chaos, wrapped in quiet disbelief. I stood by the SOAR gate, Ranger growling low in the dust, as her SUV smoked and hissed, the smell of burnt rubber and metal filling the air. Moments later, the distant wail of sirens cut through the morning, a welcome sound that made my chest tighten with relief and anticipation. Within minutes, 2 police cars and a sheriff's SUV pulled onto the gravel drive. Lights flashing, officers hopping out with hands on their holsters, scanning the scene with trained eyes. I raised my hands in greeting, explaining calmly but firmly the entire sequence. Her repeated trespasses, the reckless driving, and now the collision that could have injured anyone. Me, my family, or neighbors. The officers nodded, taking notes, photographing the damage to the gate, the deep scratches on the cedar posts, and the crumpled front end of her SUV. A deputy walked toward Karen, now pacing frantically, her face red, voice shaking as she insisted she was exercising community rights and had permission. But the officers, professional and unflinching, ignored the theatrics. I handed over my security footage, meticulously time-stamped, showing her SUV plowing through the gate multiple times over the past month, each incident escalating in recklessness. Karen's mouth opened to argue, but the deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, we've seen the footage. You're under investigation for repeated trespassing, property damage, and reckless driving." Her glare shifted to me, a mix of fury and fear, realizing her usual power play had failed spectacularly. I stayed calm, my voice low, controlled. "It ends here," I said. The officers escorted her toward the squad car, her protests drowned out by the hum of the morning breeze and the distant murmur of neighbors who had begun gathering, watching in stunned silence. People were whispering, shaking their heads, murmuring about her audacity and her downfall. And as Karen was loaded into the back of the police car, her eyes darted toward the gate she had tried to conquer, the gate now standing unbroken, steel-locking bar gleaming in the sun. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just about stopping a woman in an SUV. It was about setting a precedent, defending what was mine, and proving that patience, preparation, and principle could beat arrogance and entitlement. Ranger padded beside me, tail wagging lightly, as the officers drove away, the sound of her departing tires fading into a lesson she would never forget. Actions have consequences, and no one, not even a self-proclaimed HOA queen, is above the law. With Karen finally in police custody, the tension in the air slowly began to ease, but the echo of her audacity lingered across my ranch like a stubborn stain. Neighbors emerged cautiously from their homes, some holding phones, others simply staring in disbelief at the gate that had become the symbol of my stand. I walked the perimeter, inspecting the damage one last time, noting the deep gouges and splintered wood that told the story of repeated defiance, each mark a testament to the disrespect I had endured, and the line I refused to let her cross. The local news had arrived, cameras rolling as reporters interviewed me, capturing every detail. My warnings, the repeated trespasses, and the trap I had set to protect my property. Karen's SUV, now towed and impounded, sat like a monument to her recklessness at the edge of the gravel drive. Its once pristine white paint scarred with mud, scratches, and dents. I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction knowing she would face the full weight of the law. Charges of trespassing, property destruction, reckless driving, and endangerment of the neighborhood were being filed. The HOA board was notified, the neighbors now emboldened to speak up against her previous tyranny, recounting months and even years of harassment, fines, and intimidation tactics that she had wielded like a crown. As the sun began to set over Pine Hollow, painting the sky with gold and crimson, I stood at my repaired gate, Ranger at my side, feeling the weight of the ordeal lift slightly. The fence now felt symbolic, a boundary not just of property, but of respect, law, and principle. I knew this wouldn't make headlines forever, and people would forget in time. But for me and my land, justice had been served, and a message had been sent loud and clear. No one, no matter how entitled, could trample over others with impunity. I locked the gate one last time, feeling the satisfying click of the latch, and exhaled, knowing that for the first time in weeks, the ranch was truly mine again. Quiet, safe, and respected.